Hi, and welcome to the fifth and final episode of Zooming the Pandemic, the Comics Edition. This has been a special series for VanCAF, the Vancouver Comic Arts Festival. This time around, I'm going to be talking to Joan Steacy. As the wife of comic book legend, writer, and artist Ken Steacy, Joan's been involved with the comic book industry for over 2 decades. I got to know Ken and Joan when I moved back to Canada about 10 years ago and found out that they were developing a graphic novel program for Camosun College. They've been running that program for about 8 years, but as you will see from the conversation I have with Joan, she is so much more than just the developer with Ken of the program. She is a writer, artist of her own, and has done 2 highly personal graphic novels, which is what really made me want to include Joan in this program. Our conversation is enlightening, it's entertaining, it's highly personal, and I think you will enjoy it. Join us.
Yeah, so anyways, welcome, Joan. It's great for you to come and join me on this.
Thank you for asking me.
Well, you know, the interesting thing was when I started doing a little research, because really Borealice is what I know you from and is what made me want to include you in this. But then when I started looking around, I ran across, where was it? True North Country Comics did a podcast with you.
Oh yeah, that was a couple of weeks ago or a month ago.
Looking at, for instance, your story about your dad, like I wrote to you about that. Your dad and my dad could have crossed paths, for all I know.
I know, it's just amazing.
And that's what was going on during the Depression when people were trying to find a way to find work. They were going through what we're going through, only they didn't have technology to keep them home. They had to go and figure stuff out.
Yeah, and you do. We're very adaptable that way.
Yeah. So, but what's funny to me too is the interview I did before this one was with Trina Robbins, and you just did a story with Trina, Minion Yidden.
Yeah, I think it was 8 pages or something like that. Ken did the layouts and I did all the artwork after that. So it was a neat collaboration. Really enjoyed doing that.
So how did you come about to do that? Because I liked the connection in that you did this book about your dad.
Yeah.
And she's doing this book about her dad. Really, I mean his stories, right?
Yeah, and that's basically what I did. It was the stories my dad told me, and just little slices of life that he, that I wanted to put into a book of some sort for his 100th birthday. And I didn't know at the time if he would be alive to see it. This was back in 2007 or something. Or was it that long ago? It was a couple years before I started my own book. But yeah, and how do you compress? And I had 1 year to do it. Okay. And this little gallery in the little town I grew up in, where everybody knew my dad, wanted to have a show of all the artwork when I finished it and sell the book. So that was my deadline for 1 year. So I had to do some bit of pattern recognition. It's kind of a McLuhan technique thing, where I thought, okay, my dad, he loved wheels. He was a early recycler of scrap metal, and the cycle of life. All these things kind of gave me a little bit of, I don't know, an anchor to start on, to branch out to, mind map, and then it, finally grew out of that. And so what I did in the book, that may be completely unconscious to most people, but on every single page, there's a wheel. And I
can see that now looking back at the art.
Yeah, intended to do that. And then also at the beginning of the story, it starts out black and white. Back, 1912 came over 6 months after the Titanic. And so that black and white started the next few pages, then it became sepia, and then it started getting into real color up to present day. So I had to like compress things that he told me that would relate to that cycle or wheels and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, the stories that he told me as a kid, I remembered, like they had a big impression, like the one where the Second World, the First World War, he was too young for that, and he was too old for the Second World War to serve. So, he told me the story in Hamilton of the trains coming in and letting off the people that were in one piece, and everybody, grand parade there and celebration, then coming back. But then there was another stop that nobody knew about, and they didn't want them to know about it because they were all the people that came back damaged. And that one guy, he said, had no arms and legs, and he was in a basket, and he was proud to serve his country. And it was just like, how could I not, remember that later in life? So I thought, it's important to document these things. And I originally, everything sort of ties in. Like my graphic novel, my memoir, was all about literacy and having the struggles that I had. And at the time, I wanted to write this story for my dad. And of course, my writing skills, I was very insecure about my writing skills, period, right? And I thought, how can I write a book? And I'm like, oh, I can draw it. But okay, so I just, jotted these things down, and eventually they came into sentences and words and or paragraphs, and the content was there. Ken helped me with editing it, and I showed it to a few people, and it pulled together. And Ken originally thought, oh, why don't you do it in a comic book form? It's like, well, I don't know how to draw comics. I really don't. I've never done them before, but I do want to do this picture book, kind of like a playful, picture and text. And my dad was very playful, so I thought, well, this is, a medium that he would respond to. So that's why I made those double page spreads. Some are single, but then having the text. So when I got finished, we had a big birthday for him, and my mom was there at the nursing home, and I presented him with this book, and it was just magical. So that book gave me the confidence to tell my own story. I thought, well, I can do that, so I'll do, I'll attempt to draw comics. And I have the best art director, editor, everybody.
Yes.
So, Hall of Famer, whatever, right at my doorstep. And the thing is that I think I might have picked up a lot of stuff by osmosis, but comics are really not that easy to do. And especially for somebody who's never done them, the process of starting with the thumbnails and working up and having enough room to put the words and the balloons, so the balloons don't squash the whole image, right? And Ken slapped my wrist a whole bunch of times. He said, you didn't leave enough room.
Yeah, that's a big part of the process, is figuring out the relationship of words to imagery.
Yeah.
So when I would review portfolios and talk to young artists that were starting up, it's always something you talk to them about learning how to use fewer words to say more.
Yeah. And because I'm not a very wordy, or I wasn't before, writing, I just don't like to write a lot. So what I do write has to be jam-packed with what I need to say and not any. It always amazed me when I took these university courses, like, how can these people write so many papers if you can't say it in 3 pages? It's like, what the heck? so I was like kind of skimpy on the pages.
But that's okay, because comics really is learning how to marry the two together. It's a lot like video in that way.
Yeah. And I mean, texting, it's word balloons, it's dialogue. And the thing is that I thought, I could probably never write a novel and I wouldn't want to attempt it. But I understand, dialogue, and it's chunks of speech.
Right.
And I thought, oh, okay, I can handle that. It's not so intimidating. So that's basically, once I got the confidence to do it, to start it, and the commitment to start it.
The big one.
And once I start things, I do, push ahead. There's perseverance, persistence, and passion. And I think that's what kind of drove me on. And if you were to tell me that you're going to write a 260-page graphic novel about, your memoir, I would have thought you're crazy. I was like, this is insane. But it started to accumulate, and then it was a small book, and then I was going to do 3 books. But Andy Brown, the publisher, I kept after him, could you publish this? And he said, okay, I want you to finish it all, and we'll put it in one big book. I thought, okay. But it just grew. There are pages that I thought, oh, I need a little more development here. And fortunately, I didn't have to throw any pages out, which was remarkable. When you think of, people who make a movie, like so much footage is on, cutting room floor. I don't want to throw out anything because it takes so long to do a page.
Right.
Yeah, it was very cathartic for me because I found out later that a lot of people could relate to it in the difficulties of, the school system. If you don't fit that way of thinking, then, you're labeled. And there's, a lot of labels that are going around and still are. Yeah. And I just, I felt they were very damaging to my psyche, especially, at a certain point, I started believing certain things that I shouldn't have.
Yeah, because the system tells you continuously that you're dumb.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, you start believing them.
And the thing is that being with Ken, who knew everybody and anybody, I mean, I was a wallflower, and now you can't shut me up, right? But anyways, back then I was just absorbing all these intellectuals in Toronto, and it was like the 70s and the late 70s, the punk rock and the intellectual, stimulation that I was getting with the art college. It was all there, and Ken would just expose me to all these people that, I had to, it was either sink or swim, and I didn't want to sink.
Yeah.
So, the first time I met Eric McLuhan, I was very nervous because, of course, he was freshly minted PhD, and I thought, oh my God, he's not going to want to talk to me, And then, and the scene in my book where, we open the door and here's Eric with this goofy hat on that has these big bullshit protectors. So, it was very playful. And, that's the kind of language I spoke. It's like, my dad was really playful and goofy, and I was kind of that way. And so to meet people that my thought with maybe, stuffy academic, but he wasn't. I had a very quiet voice and, in the background, and Ken was, this oak tree, and I was the nut, right?
How long did it take you, by the way, to write Aurora Borealis? Like not the book that I have, the actual.
I guess 8 years, like the thing is, it accumulated over a lot of time because I was doing other things. We were developing a program in comics and graphic novels at Camosun College while I was doing this. So I would discipline myself to do, I think I was up to maybe 3 pages a week, and that just about killed me. And then I throttled back to 2. That was okay. But I would always have, I found the best method was, to write out the script. He said, she said, play with it after that. Like, let it be a little bit fluid. But I knew, there's certain beats that I had to accomplish in the whole arc of the story. And that was tricky because the ending that you see in the Conundrum book was not my original plan of ending. And I think maybe I wanted to end it too soon because I was tired of doing it. It was a lot of work. I want to get it over with, right? But the more and more, people were saying, Diana Schutz, the editor of, or she was the editor of Dark Horse Comics, and Ken knows her. And I showed it to her at one point, and she said, you start out Aurora Borealis, okay, Borealis, and then you don't deliver. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, you're right. and it made more sense not to end it the way I originally did, of us, our kids are playing video games and we're in the background wondering what they're talking about. So I had to have this Borealis in there. And that's where I came up with the last page of we went up to Mount Tomei, and everybody was taking cell phone pictures of the Borealis. So it tied in with the original, starting out with the technology of television and ends with the technology of the smartphone. And it sort of became bookends, and it seemed more of I like that ending a lot better, because the whole thing was about technology and how it shapes us and changes us, and the whole literacy and the pre-literate culture that Marshall and Eric were talking about all the time. Like, I absorbed all that because it was fascinating to me that the pre-literates, they're very intelligent people, but they don't write down anything. And to me, it was like, yeah, I didn't write down anything for a long time.
Right.
Because, you'd be mocked or whatever because your style is terrible, or your grammar is terrible, or your spelling. So I avoided it for a long time. And that's why the book I did for my dad was so important. It really broke through.
When you did this project with Trina, did you feel like you were helping another woman with her connection to her father the way you did with your book? I mean, how did that come about that she asked you to be a part of that?
Well, I think originally she approached Ken. Oh, that was a while ago. Then we thought, well, why don't we do a collaboration? And so it was kind of through Ken and via Trina that, we all kind of did it together. But yeah, there was a really neat connection of, I've known Trina as long as I've known Ken, Steve and Trina. It's just, they go way back.
Yeah, for me too.
And it was really interesting, that parallel. She's digging those stories up that, that were kind of in the back of your mind as a child, but then as an adult, you got the tools, you can draw, you can write, then you can bring those stories out that have been in the back of your mind. So yeah, it was really neat for Trina to take on, that project, and then involve so many other artists in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Camosun College. I know that Ken told me that it sounds like COVID has put it on hiatus for the time being, at least. But you guys have been doing that for quite a while. When did you start this program? And I mean, you and Ken have done it together from what I can see.
Yeah.
And where did the idea for it come, and how did it come to be at Hamilton College?
Well, we used to go to conventions and kids would ask, where can I learn how to draw comics? And we couldn't tell them where, because there weren't any schools across Canada, basically. It was 8 years ago that we started the program, but we conceived it maybe, before that, like 10 years ago, we were talking about it. How could we create something like that for students, so that they can tell their stories? And, we went to Toronto, but of course we don't live there, so that was not workable. And then we came back here and wrote out a really nice proposal. And at the time, at Camosun College, they had a dean that was very innovative and wanted to bring in new programming and was willing to take a risk like this. Nobody else had done it before, right? He opened it up and he read our proposal and he said, I'll give you a 9 out of 10 and we'll get you in. And it was like the stars aligned and the clouds opened up, and it was within walking distance of where we live. So this was remarkable. And we had to develop all this curriculum. Like Ken and I, it was a joint effort. We were the program. Basically, we decided what courses students would need, what content they needed, or the best experience that a student could have in a very short period of time. It's 8 months. Okay, how are we going to put 8 months and turn them into comic book artists? Well, we had to figure out a way. I mean, we had to learn words that we didn't even know existed in the school curriculum, like rubrics and all this kind of stuff. It was quite the challenge, but we had people helping us with, doing an official outline and, the rubrics and all that kind of stuff to make it so that the students got enough drawing, enough writing, editing too, visual storytelling, the language of comics, the comics culture, publishing and, comic conventions were a big part of all that. So we had to put all this together. And, over the years, we had brought in people from the industry to say, what are you looking for? And the thing is that Sheridan College, well, Ken and I met at Sheridan College way back in the day. And we wanted to make a program that it was like Sheridan was attracting all these people from Disney and Pixar. Everybody came to Sheridan to recruit students, and we wanted to do something like that for our students. It's like we want to have, the game developers and like comics can translate into anything, storyboards for movies, all that kind of stuff. Right. So we had gaming CEOs coming and to our comic convention that we created for the students at the end of the year. Yeah, it was called the Camosun Comic Art Festival. And we turned it into a learning outcome where their capstone project that they would show and sell at this little mini comic convention at the school. It was a full comic book that they wrote, illustrated, everything. They put it together digitally. That was all taught. So by the end of that 8 months, they could put a comic book together in every aspect of it. And then we would invite professional comic book artists from the industry, graphic novelists, to mentor those students at that event. We would also get them to guest speak, throughout the year as well. And it just grew out of that. It was amazing. And the students, we set up the little convention, like a real convention, and every student had a booth with their original artwork up, with their comic book. They had, they printed them at the school, at the college. sold to the public. And I taught character design and structural drawing. And for the character design, I got them to make their own characters of their, whoever's in their comics, the character that they created, and make it in 3 dimensions. And so they could have those at their little booth, and just an extra element for the public to see. And now it's uncertain where it's going. And it's too bad if it does slip away. I think we, in that 8 years that we were there, we accomplished what we intended to do. And, the people in the industry were coming to our a program or our convention to recruit students. Well, it is really interesting because, we thought we might have gotten a lot of people that wanted to draw superheroes, but that wasn't the case. They wanted to tell their own stories that only they could tell. And originally we had, I think at a certain point, after 8 years, a tipping point came where there were more women than men. And the last couple of years, it was even more radical than, way more women. And I think a lot of, that generation, Calvin and Hobbes generation, we've had the Harry Potter generation, all that kind of stuff. And the manga, the manga that really appealed to women, and guys too, the anime characters, what they look like, and the animation that was going on. A lot of people ended up getting into animation through our program. Yeah, and their comic book that they produced was like a portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
One of our students that we were just talking to, actually one of our first year students that we keep in touch with, she went to Vancouver at a little tiny convention, and she was showing off her comic and that, and a animation company said, "Could you come and work for us?"
Wow.
And now she's doing fabulously well. And it'd be so nice to have somebody like that to come back and teach the program after Ken and I are not there. I mean, we're reaching a point where we've done it, and
you're ready to hand it on.
Yeah, it would be nice too.
So we just need to find a couple of people who are watching this show, who have some background in teaching, who love comics and animation, who would get in touch with you. You create the curriculum, and they'd run the show and pay you an honorarium for developing it.
Yeah, I mean, we know exactly what works and what doesn't work.
Right.
Over 8 years, we have gone through a learning curve that we got it right on this year. Like it was fabulous every year, but it took a long time to plug everything in perfectly, and we didn't have any attrition except one person had to move to Vancouver, but they all finished the program. And the thing is that they'll have this language of visual storytelling for life. And I always tell them, don't wait as long as I did, because I came to it very late, but they have it in their back pocket, and they can always, as they live their life, they may have some really amazing stories, and they can do it. They can, and get it out there. The internet is an amazing place to, publishers are actually coming to, web comic people. Mm-hmm. They're posting, a couple of pages a week, and then they get noticed, they get a following, a publisher finds them, and then they say, okay, we'll publish you. Like our son did that. He did it himself, and now he's published with Cloudscape Comics.
Yeah. So there's definitely a stepping stone going on once you gain the tools from doing a course like this.
Yeah, the tools are so important. And, we don't teach students how to become artists. We teach them how to have the tools to become artists.
They have it within them already.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's their content. And we wanted them to be who they are. Living with a comic book artist for so long, it's like, and I saw all the mainstream comics, and you know, Trina talks about this too. It was a man's world.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so it didn't really appeal to me until I started reading graphic novels. And,
Well, yeah, there's been a real revolution in what people are doing. So looking at the fact that the college courses are kind of wrapping up right now, and I know, and you know, the reality is you and I and Ken and Trina, we're all at that point in our lives where we're kind of, well, Trina doesn't slow down, but the rest of us are slowing down.
I know.
Trina doesn't slow down.
No, she speeds up.
She actually ended my interview with her by appealing to people and saying that she has done three or four stories during the pandemic, but she's got more writing in her. She just wants to find artists to work with. Doesn't even care about the money. She just wants to find artists to work with.
Yeah.
She just wants to write.
Unbelievable.
Amazing. Looking at everything we've gone through with this pandemic, and artists, I think, and writers, creative people are not as hit by it as much because we tend to kind of squirrel away in our homes and do our thing.
Yeah, that sense of time, like I don't feel as rushed, and I actually like that we're not going here or there or you know, having to do stuff. I just found at the end of the year, the school year, I was just so burnt out. And actually, when the pandemic happened, I was kind of like, oh, woo. As human beings, we can only take a certain amount of pressure on ourselves to do so much stuff. For who? It's like, if you want to relax for a while, do it. Because then you may be productive later on. It's like when it's like taking a rest. You have to have sleep in order to be productive during the day. If we didn't have this pandemic, we would never have discovered that about ourselves.
Yeah.
And yeah, when I make a meal, it's like a work of art, you know, and I'm in my garden, I'm just like, that's a work of art. And I'm trying to landscape. It's like, that's heavy, brutal work, but you know, I have to think about the design and everything. And that's my summer thing. I've pushed back from Instagram. I'm not, you know, constantly going on my blog to, you know, I just shut it out of my mind. And it's good for the soul to take a break.
I think it's also a BC thing that it's going to stop raining for a little bit of time. So you need to get outside, enjoy the outdoors, listen to what Dr. Bonnie Henry talks about, and just get out there.
Yeah, dig in the dirt. It's like, it's going to be rainy before we know it. And you know, use that rainy day time, you know, to cozy up and
do our creative thinking. But right now we can do our creative thinking while gardening or taking a walk in the woods or whatever.
Yeah, it's not empty space. It's full of stuff.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Joan. I know I did. As you could see, there's always so much to learn when you talk to Joan. This concludes my Zooming the Pandemic Comics edition. I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed talking to all of these great comic book creators. If you've enjoyed this series and you'd like to learn more about what I'm working on, do join me at Zooming the Pandemic at NewWest.tv. That's NewWest.tv, or you can find the NewWest TV channel on YouTube. I've enjoyed doing this. I hope you have. In the meantime, as the words of our great hero, Dr. Bonnie Henry, asking all of you to be calm, be safe, be kind.